In this conversation, we'll be talking about America in World War II. And we're going to frame this conversation within the context of the idea of freedom. Because we're not just going to look at America's involvement in the war on the front overseas, but we're going to be looking at American developments here on the home front. And that's why it's important to frame this conversation within the context of the idea of American freedom. Because, well, FDR claimed that the United States needed to go to war to defend the four freedoms for all of the world, for all people, all humanity. Those four freedoms being the freedom of speech and expression, the freedom to worship the God of your choosing, a freedom from want, and a freedom from fear. Those four freedoms, as idealistic as they are and as attached as they were to the concept of American identity, these were not freedoms that were enjoyed readily by all people groups here at home, namely women, African Americans. We've seen that over the course of this semester. What about Mexican Americans and Latin Americans? Or what about Japanese Americans? And we see with the Executive Order 9066 and the internment of all people on the West Coast of Japanese descent, we see that freedom is restricted here on the home front during this time. Of course, we'll also look at how the war and war production stimulated the American economy and cured the ills of the Great Depression in the United States, and how that war production and how the war draft and the ramping up of forces took men out of jobs, either in the factories or in the fields, that opened up new opportunities for women, African Americans, and Mexicans or Mexican Americans. And so, while freedoms were certainly restricted here at home for many people groups, there were some new opportunities that opened up that would lead to these people groups challenging discrimination and discriminatory practices in the United States. And it would really give birth to the civil rights movement. We will also look at American military involvement overseas, and we will bookend it with an examination of the dropping of the atomic bombs and the implications that those atomic bombs had on humanity and on the atomic age and the Cold War that would follow the end of the Second World War. This series will be broken up into a number of lectures covering subtopics, including Fighting World War II, the Home Front, Visions of Post-War Freedom, the American Dilemma, and the End of the War. And of course, as always, if you have any questions about the content as you listen to any one of these lectures or after having reviewed the entire series, please feel free to email me, or you can post your question to the coffee shop discussion board on Canvas so that your peers can engage in a discussion around that question as well.